Tutankhamun's mask is an icon. And I think part of it is because it is made of solid gold, and a lot of people get wowed by that.
The burial mask of Tutankhamun has become legendary, and much of its fame stems from its construction, pure solid gold that leaves viewers awestruck. This famous mask represents the most recognized face across the globe. For an entire century, experts accepted that it was crafted specifically for the young pharaoh. However, recent evidence suggests we've been mistaken all along. In a groundbreaking development, researchers employed an innovative technique called quantum imaging to examine what lies beneath the golden exterior. Their findings are causing major disruptions throughout the field of Egyptian archaeology. The scanning process uncovered previously hidden features, minute modifications, and a phantom-like inscription that was deliberately removed from historical records. This represents far more than a simple archaeological find. It's the exposure of a deception that's lasted 3 millennia. The beloved mask harbors a mystery that fundamentally transforms our understanding of ancient Egypt's most prosperous era. But before we expose what they've been hiding for over a century, hit that like button and subscribe, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about ancient Egypt. The discovery and initial observations. Within the tomb lay an extraordinary array of riches: golden war chariots, precious gemstones, sculptures, and a magnificent throne fit for royalty. However, positioned deep inside the third and innermost burial container was the singular item destined to fascinate humanity for generations to come: the golden funerary mask. This artifact is absolutely stunning. Standing approximately 21 inches in height, it tips the scales at over 22 pounds, comparable in weight to a standard bowling ball, except fashioned entirely from pure gold. Precious materials, including lapis lazuli and turquoise stones, decorate its surface. For ancient Egyptian civilization, this represented something beyond mere artistic achievement. It functioned as mystical apparatus. Their belief system held that gold embodied the physical form of divine beings. The mask served a dual purpose, safeguarding the pharaoh's preserved body while enabling his essence to identify its earthly vessel in the realm beyond death. Lacking this crucial element, his spirit risked eternal wandering. The reverse side even features protective incantations from their book of sacred texts, inscribed in hieroglyphic writing to shield him from harm. For many decades, the global community regarded this mask as an absolutely perfect creation without flaws, representing the pinnacle of ancient Egyptian civilization's achievements. But there's an unexpected twist. Almost from the moment of discovery, specialists observed elements that simply couldn't be explained. The remarkable aspect is that these hints were visible all along, right before everyone's eyes. The timeline problem. Initially, there existed the challenge of chronology. King Tutankhamun died unexpectedly at roughly 19 years of age, most probably due to complications from an illness following a severe fracture to his leg. Based on Egyptian religious customs, a pharaoh required mummification and entombment within precisely 70 days. Consider the implications: 70 days to excavate a burial chamber, construct 3 nested coffins, assemble thousands of burial objects, and forge this solid gold mask. The task appeared unfeasible. The burial chamber itself supported this hypothesis of hasty preparation. It measured considerably smaller than burial chambers of other pharaohs. Certain wall murals appeared incomplete, as though the craftsmen suddenly abandoned their work mid-process. Even the massive stone outer coffin showed damage at its edges, suggesting laborers were forced to break pieces off, simply to squeeze it into the confined space. This prompted specialists to examine the burial treasures more carefully. And here's something fascinating. Numerous items appeared unsuited for Tutankhamun specifically. They discovered sculptures with distinctly different facial characteristics. They found ornamental pieces seemingly designed for female wear. Then, they re-examined the mask with fresh scrutiny. The ear mystery. The most significant evidence lay in the ears. The mask displays pierced earlobes. Throughout ancient Egyptian culture, exclusively young children and females wore ear jewelry. A mature male pharaoh, particularly depicted on his sacred burial artifact, would absolutely never appear with pierced ears. This constituted a glaring anomaly. Certain specialists additionally observed that the facial features themselves appeared unusual. The characteristics seemed refined, nearly feminine in nature, and the gold comprising the face exhibited a somewhat different hue, slightly more reddish compared to the gold forming the remaining headdress portions. An astonishing hypothesis started taking shape. Perhaps the mask wasn't actually created for King Tutankhamun. Perhaps during the frantic rush to meet the 70-day requirement, the religious officials simply appropriated a mask crafted for another person, hastily modified it, and placed it upon Tutankhamun's mummified remains. This generated the most critical question imaginable. If the mask didn't belong to Tutankhamun originally, whose face did it bear? Enter Nefertiti. All attention shifted toward one of history's most enigmatic and influential female rulers, Queen Nefertiti. She served as Tutankhamun's stepmother, and following her husband's death, she disappeared entirely from historical documentation. Certain historians theorize she actually assumed the role of pharaoh, governing under an alternative identity. What if this mask was initially fashioned for her? Such a scenario would account for the pierced ears and feminine characteristics. Throughout many decades, this remained the most heated discussion within Egyptian archaeological circles. Was humanity's most celebrated artifact a true masterpiece or simply a repurposed item? For decades, it existed purely as speculation. Then, X-ray technology appeared to resolve the controversy definitively. The beard disaster. The controversy surrounding the mask continued throughout most of the 20th century. The Nefertiti hypothesis generated considerable excitement, yet no method existed to verify it without causing harm to the invaluable mask, and authorization for such action would never be granted. The mask remained displayed in the Egyptian Museum, located in Cairo, viewed by countless visitors, its mysteries remaining sealed away. Subsequently, during 2014, catastrophe occurred. The incident horrified people worldwide. While undergoing standard maintenance procedures, the mask's elongated braided beard, itself symbolizing divine status, broke completely off. Museum personnel responded with alarm. Rather than consulting professional restoration experts, they attempted repairs independently, and they selected the absolute worst material imaginable: epoxy adhesive. This industrial-grade bonding agent typically used for pipe repairs or automotive work. They applied it liberally, reattached the beard, and hoped the damage would go unnoticed. Everyone noticed immediately. The truly shocking part involved them even smearing some adhesive onto the golden chin area. Egypt's most treasured possession, which had endured for over 33 centuries, suffered damage from a tube of hardware store glue. The public reaction was enormous. Global outrage ensued, and that's an understatement. The Egyptian authorities were compelled to intervene. They initiated a comprehensive investigation and assembled a team of leading international specialists headed by a German restoration expert named Christian Ekman. His responsibility involved reversing the damage and preserving the mask. The scientific investigation. However, Ekman recognized this catastrophe also presented an opportunity. Prior to reattaching the beard, he would finally receive authorization to examine the mask using methods never before employed. He would utilize contemporary scientific techniques to resolve the Nefertiti question conclusively. His research group didn't rely on standard X-ray imaging. They employed high-resolution X-ray fluorescence technology, abbreviated as XRF. This method directs X-ray beams toward an object, causing the atoms to emit fluorescent signals that reveal precisely which elements exist within. It can determine the chemical signature of the gold. Here's the critical point. If the facial portion had been removed from Nefertiti's mask and a replacement face for Tutankhamun welded into position, the XRF scanning would detect it. The gold compositions would differ. Welding traces and minute joints, along with additional alteration indicators, would be visible. The research team invested months scanning every section of the mask. The findings arrived, and the entire Egyptian archaeological community experienced relief. Ekman's conclusions were definitive. The mask showed no modifications. First, regarding the gold composition, the XRF scanning confirmed that the gold in the facial area and the gold in the headdress matched perfectly. They originated from identical metal sources. The minor color variation people observed was merely an optical illusion or an intentional artistic decision. Second, concerning the name inscription, the hieroglyphic symbols spelling Tutankhamun's name were authentic. No indication existed of another name being scraped away or flattened beneath. But the conclusive evidence proved most ingenious. Ekman highlighted the delicate blue decorative bands encircling the eyes and adorning the headdress. These consist of fragile colored glass materials, yet the glass remained flawless, completely intact. The determination was inescapable. The mask was fabricated as one unified piece exclusively for King Tutankhamun. So what explained the pierced ears? Ekman suggested it represented merely an aesthetic decision, or perhaps a remnant from Tutankhamun's youth. Essentially, scientific analysis had resolved the enigma. The Nefertiti hypothesis was disproven. The narrative became that Egypt's craftsmen possessed such extraordinary skill that they successfully created this impeccable 22-pound masterpiece from nothing in merely 70 days. Ekman's research team meticulously extracted the epoxy and, in a beautifully symbolic final gesture, reattached the beard using beeswax, the identical natural bonding substance the ancient Egyptians would have utilized. The mask was restored to completeness, and the mystery was considered solved. Universal acceptance followed this conclusion until revolutionary technology transformed everything. The quantum revolution, Ekman's documentation, became the definitive statement. The matter was resolved. Tour guides, historical publications, and documentary films all repeated the new authorized narrative. The mask was completely, unquestionably Tutankhamun's. But the situation proved more complex. For a select group of physicists and Egyptian archaeology experts, something continued feeling incorrect. The 70-day time frame, the undersized burial chamber, the reused coffins, and above all, those pierced ears. Ekman's interpretation that it represented merely stylistic preference seemed insufficient. It remained an unresolved element in an otherwise neat conclusion. The difficulty, they contended, wasn't Ekman's information. It was his technological methodology. X-rays and XRF scanners possess remarkable capabilities, yet they have limitations. They excel at detecting density differences. They can distinguish between gold and welding material or identify fractures. But what if the ancient craftsmen demonstrated greater sophistication? What if they utilized identical gold from the same source to fill the ear piercings? What if they flattened the original inscription and then re-engraved it without introducing any additional metal? What if the face was attached with such masterful precision that the connections were microscopically seamless? X-rays would interpret all of this as one solid, uniform artifact. They cannot perceive the metal's history. They cannot determine if one section was reheated or hammered while another section remained untouched. To observe that, you would require an entirely different level of technological capability, and remarkably, such technology had just been perfected. It's designated quantum resonance imaging, abbreviated as QRI. Simplified, it doesn't merely capture an image. It projects a beam of controlled quantum particles toward an object. These particles bounce off individual atoms like miniature sonar waves. By interpreting the reverberation of those atoms, the apparatus can construct a three-dimensional representation not merely of the material composition, but of its molecular architecture and thermal background. It can distinguish between metal that was melted and solidified once versus metal that was solidified, reheated, hammered, and then solidified again. It could theoretically locate a connection that was merely several atoms in thickness. Project Osiris, a confidential research team, financed by a private educational institution and operating under the designation Project Osiris, obtained authorization from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities to conduct a new, non-destructive scan. This was presented as simply testing the technology. They anticipated finding nothing remarkable. They merely wanted to demonstrate their costly new apparatus functioned properly. In late 2024, after the Grand Egyptian Museum had closed to visitors for the evening, the research team transported the massive QRI scanning equipment inside. They directed the beam toward the mask for extended hours. The sole audible sound was the quiet humming of the machinery as it scanned the gold, examining one atomic layer sequentially. The research director observed the data flowing onto the computer screen, initially just verifying what Ekman had previously documented. Then the scanner concentrated on the cartouche, the oval frame containing Tutankhamun's name. The initial images materialized. The research director dropped his coffee cup. The shocking revelation. The information from the quantum scanning didn't simply contradict the previous X-ray conclusions, it demolished them. The Project Osiris research team stared at their display screens, comprehending they were the first individuals in 33 centuries to witness the reality. The entire discipline of Egyptian archaeology was about to experience upheaval, the shocking revelation. The information from the quantum scanning didn't simply contradict the previous X-ray conclusions, it demolished them. The Project Osiris research team stared at their display screens, comprehending they were the first individuals in 33 centuries to witness the reality. The entire discipline of Egyptian archaeology was about to experience upheaval. First, concerning the face. The quantum scan revealed what the research team termed thermal ghosting, completely surrounding the edge of the mask's facial region. This represents a distinctive molecular signature indicating the gold in that precise outline had been subjected to extreme heat at a different temperature than the gold of the headdress. Christian Ekman had correctly stated that welding from the front would have shattered the glass, but the ancient craftsmen didn't weld it from the front. They attached it from the rear using a technique of high-pressure heating that preserved the front surface flawlessly. The X-rays missed detecting it, but the quantum scan observed the molecular tension. The face had been removed and substituted. Second, regarding the ears, The scan on the earlobe regions proved even more startling. The X-rays detected solid gold. The quantum scan discovered two perfect cylindrical plugs. The ancient craftsmen had filled the original pierced openings with gold rods from precisely the same composition. They subsequently hammered and polished them with such extraordinary skill that the seams became imperceptible. However, the quantum scan identified the difference in the metal's grain structure and density. The ears had been plugged, but the most astounding aspect, the discovery that stunned the entire research team, concerned the name. The X-ray scanning observed only Tutankhamun's name, but the quantum scan examined deeper at the atomic displacement below the surface. It discovered that the gold in that location had been hammered, flattened, and scraped in a manner the remaining mass portions had not experienced. The original hieroglyphic symbols had been beaten into complete obliteration, and the quantum scanner could perform one additional function. By charting the faint microscopic remnants of the original hammering, the phantoms of the first inscription, the computer could digitally reconstruct what previously existed there. The research team executed the program. The original hieroglyphic symbols gradually appeared on the display screen. It was not Tutankhamun's name. The name read, Neferneferuaten, the truth revealed. This was the definitive evidence. Neferneferuaten is the official throne designation that Queen Nefertiti is believed to have adopted when she assumed the position of pharaoh. The Nefertiti hypothesis wasn't simply accurate. It was now scientifically proven. The quantum scan exposed the complete dramatic narrative. When King Tutankhamun died suddenly, no mask existed ready for him. His powerful successor, likely appropriated Tutankhamun's intended grand burial chamber for his own use. Panicked and facing the 70-day requirement, the religious officials appropriated the burial mask of the preceding pharaoh, Nefertiti. They worked frantically. They filled her pierced ears. They commissioned a new facial representation of the young king to be fabricated. They expertly removed Nefertiti's face and installed Tutankhamun's in its position. Finally, they hammered her royal designation flat and re-engraved it with his. The mask now resides in the new museum, observed by millions of visitors. But now we understand the truth. It makes you contemplate what other supposedly resolved mysteries are simply awaiting the appropriate technology to reveal the actual story. What's your perspective on this discovery? Share your thoughts in the comments section. And remember to like and subscribe for more hidden secrets from history.